If you're using the chat, make sure you're using the everyone option. That just allows everybody, as you can imagine, to see what you're saying and just build that community in this live stream today. Lastly, please be kind. This is a safe space. We don't want any hatred in this session. It's supposed to be nice and calm and relaxed. So if you would like to read our code of conduct, you can read it at this URL here. For any future events, please go to figma.com/events. We try and run these every single month. We're actually introducing new ones in French and German as well. So if you're that way inclined, make sure you head over there to see what we've got coming up. And if you do have any ideas or suggestions, please drop those at community@figma.com. Today's session is in the file, building a headless design system. I'm very excited for this because it's not something most people are approaching or doing, and it's something I predict will happen a lot more in the future. So I'm really excited to introduce Esther, who'll be running us through what she's working on with her team over in the Himalayas. So Esther, over to you.
Thank you, Louis. I'm really excited to be here today. Let me just share my screen.
Great.
Yeah. And once again, my name is Esther Cheran, and I have my background in product management. But in the recent years, I have been working as a consultant design system architect. I have also been working closely with Jan Six as a co-creator of the Figma Tokens plugin. Apart from this, I'm one of the co-founders of a product company, which is currently in stealth mode, where we are building an advanced design tokens management solution, which is very relevant for teams managing complex design token libraries or a multi-brand design system, and which is what I will be talking about today. A little context about my talk today. This design system, or rather the headless design system that I will be showing you today, is a design system boilerplate to build multi-brand design systems. So with this in mind, I will not dive deep into the actual project that can be built with this design system, but rather I would like to show you how it can be leveraged to build a design system for a new brand or one that serves multiple brands or teams. Another important thing that I would like you to keep in mind is that this is a fully tokenized design system, which means that the entire appearance is based on design tokens. And if you're not very familiar with design tokens, that's okay. I will go into depth on this topic later on in the presentation. And before I go into the files, let me give you a brief overview of all the topics that I will be covering. So I will be talking about what is a headless design system, a little bit about our project and file structure, and a little bit of design token primer, where I'll talk about what are design tokens, and design tokens, especially in the context of this project, and the Figma Tokens plugin. After that, I would like to take you through a few demos. One is where we will be building a cart using this design system, and also a theming demo on a full page. Later on, I would also like to take you through briefly of how to use the system using a single library or multiple brand libraries. Now, you guys might be wondering what is a headless design system and why it is called a headless design system. Well, I actually came up with the term headless design system because as the system got more and more tokenized, it started reminding me of a headless application. And the reason why I felt that this was so is because if you look at a component in isolation, it doesn't really have any form or shape until it is linked to a set of theme tokens. So if you see over here, I have a headless component, and here I've just turned on some strokes to show that this is a component. Otherwise, it does not have any appearance to it. But now, once you add the design tokens to the headless component, that's when you get a theme component, and that's where the appearance looks like. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about the project file structure and why I have gone ahead with single file components. And some of you may already have the debate about library structure, and particularly about having a single library file, or should we break it down into multiple files, or maybe having a single file per component. And I'm aware that every structure has its pros and cons, but during the course of building this headless design system over the last year or so, we felt that in this particular context, a single file component structure worked really well for a number of reasons. And one big advantage that we found is having the ability to create multiple pages for a component. For example, creating documentation, development handoff, keeping track of versions, etc. And it was also very easy from a project management point of view. For example, having the ability to link component documents directly to Jira task, or providing access to a specific component to a developer or a collaborator. And I also felt that it also created an extra level of symmetry, as the Figma file structure is the same as the code component library that we have. And also in the past, we have also experienced some performance issues with large Figma files, which again will not happen with the single file structure. So at this point, let me just jump into Figma, the project structure, and show you the file structure. Sorry, just one second. So over here, you can see we have organized the design system components in a project, and this is what we call the headless design system. And you can see that we have some black covers, and over here some white covers. The black ones indicate that they are the components, and the white ones indicate patterns. And while I strongly believe that patterns are, what I mean to say is that I strongly believe that the design system should primarily hold components, there are a few patterns that are so common that we decided to include them in our base design system. It's also interesting to note that we have divided our components into logical groupings, and these groupings are used on multiple levels actually. For example, the design tokens are also grouped in a similar way. So you can see over here the actions, there's one grouping, and then I have feedback, input, and so on. And I'll get more into that in a bit. So let me just open a button component. So over here, you can see the file structure, and this is the same across all our components. And the first thing that you see over here is a button, which I think is a pretty standard cover. It's largely based on Joey Banks' cover community file, which I think works great. And on the cover, first of all, you can see over here the status of the component, which has a couple of variants. I can show you. We have in progress, ready for dev, ready for feedback, completed, outdated, or archived. Let me get back to completed. And then below the status, we have the name of the component. The name consists of the component group followed by the component name. And when a component doesn't belong to any group, then it's just the name of the component. And below that, we have the custom, the component tag, which is a reference to the HTML custom element from our Stencil web component library. And of course, here we have the mugshots of all the people who have worked on the component. If you see over here, this thumbnail is actually a component which is part of a utility file where we have kept things like our document thumbnail, the component documentation sheet, deprecation notice, and this is used across all our components for ease of maintenance. And let me go back to the button. So the next page that I would like to show you guys is the documentation page. And the documentation page is actually structured following the component variant API. And rather than showing all the variants of the component, we feel it's more important to easily get an overview of the different features the component has to offer. So if you see over here, we have the variants and state, size, acquired, icon end, icon start for the button. Similarly, over here, you can see the variants of the button, which is CTA, primary, secondary, negative, and the different states over here. Then the sizes, which ranges from small, medium, large, and extra large. And also we have a quiet button for primary, secondary, negative, and then the options of icon start and icon end. And since this is a boilerplate, we do not have elaborate documentation, as you can see, on how it should be used, but what we feel is that each team can actually customize this page to include how much of the documentation that they want to use. And we actually have a storybook set up for all the components, which has a little more elaborate documentation. Let me just open it to show a little bit how it looks like. So over here on the left, you can see that the components here are again grouped according to how our Figma library is structured. And let me just open button. And over here, you can see that the button has a variant and a story, a playground and a story for each variant, a CTA, primary, secondary, negative, the sizes, the quiet, and the disabled. And let me just show you the documentation part of it. So it has a little more elaborate documentation, but this is still very generic. So we have the table of options for API. But what, again, as I mentioned, that we feel that this can be built upon each team depending upon their needs. And since this session is focused on the Figma part of the design system, I will not spend much time on the development side of the design system. So let me just go back to Figma. So I was showing you the documentation for the button component. Let me quickly show you the documentation for another component, which is avatar. As you can see over here, it becomes much clearer that we have the documentation for the types and sizes, while the Figma component itself might have many variants, but the documentation, we are just showing the types and the sizes. And this is done so that we avoid many repetitive variants. For this moment, I'll just skip the next few pages and let me just talk a little bit more about the component versioning. Let me go back here. So here you can see the Figma component, and this is the Figma component page, and this is where the published component is always held. And the idea is that whenever we publish a version, we duplicate the Figma component page and name a version number to it. For example, here. And also we rename the component so that it doesn't get published. And changes are always made on the Figma component page, and to avoid any instances detaching. And again, once again, we make a new version and the component gets published. So over here, you can see that we have a change log whenever we move from one version to another of what has changed in that. And we have the older versions sitting in these pages and the latest version over here. The next two pages that I want to show actually are the handoff and the theming. And let me just zoom out a little bit. But because, so we have the handoff and the theming pages, but because this design system is actually fully tokenized using design tokens, I we'll first give a brief introduction to design tokens as well as the Figma token plugin, which we need to build a system with design tokens in Figma. Let me just go back here, and while doing this, I'll demonstrate the Figma token plugin while explaining the basic concepts of design token side by side. Just give me a bit. Okay, here we are. So what are design tokens? The design tokens are variables that hold a design decision. And let me just start with a color. So here we have a color blue with this hex value, which in this case is stored in this blue 500. So from here on, this is the design token, which is holding the value, this hex value of the blue color. And let me add another one, which is gray 700. And this is the hex value for this token. And so these are the tokens that we call option tokens. So here we have gray 700, blue 500, and red 400. We are calling this the option tokens. And we can use this to style any of the design elements. For example, we have a button, we have a typography element, or a radio button. And they are all being tokenized using this blue 500. But there's one small problem. If you see here, the button, the typography, and the radio button, they're all linking to blue 500. And what if I wanted to change just the color of the button? If I change the blue 500, then both these two elements would also get affected. So that's when I would like to introduce another kind of token, which is the alias token. And this is a token which is sitting between the option token and the component. Over here, this is the action primary background. Now, if you look in this diagram, you can see that each of this token has a clear purpose. For example, action primary background, foreground accent, inputs active. Right now, they are all linking to blue 500. But now what I can do is I can update one group without affecting the other. So I can update the actions primary background to link to red 400, and it will not affect the typography or the radio button. In short, I guess we can see that option tokens describe the value of alias token, while the alias tokens describe the purpose, while they're referencing an option token. And in an ideal world, one source of truth, design tokens would be the one source of truth for design decisions, which can then be used by designers and developers to drive their theme files. And if you ask why we are not using design tokens in our design tools yet, the answer is, unfortunately, we're not there yet. For example, we have color styles in Figma. We can store our colors as, let's say, gray 400, 500, or gray 600, or text muted, for example. But if you see here, and the example that I just mentioned, and I wanted text muted to be referencing gray 500, that is not possible at the moment. And we have text styles in Figma, but if I wanted to define them in an atomic manner, I cannot do that at the moment. And we have auto layout, and that is like an awesome feature. But again, if I wanted to store some reusable values, Reusable values, I can't at this point, and I would have to type it again and again over here. Similarly, we cannot have reusable values for things like drop shadow or gradients or border radii or border width and so on. That's where Figma tokens come in. Because with Figma tokens, we can do all that. Figma tokens offers color tokens, typography tokens, spacing tokens, border radii tokens, border width tokens, opacity, sizing, and box shadow. So let's get started with Figma tokens. So first, we would have to install the plugin. You can find a plugin in the community. Just type Figma tokens. And you can find it over here. You can click on install. So you see I've already installed it. And let's see what we can do with Figma tokens a little bit. So let me just turn on Figma tokens. So you can see over here, I have already created a few tokens for sizing and space. Let me start by creating a new token for border radius. Let's say border radius small, and let me give that a value of 8. And let me create one more. Let's say medium, and let me give that a value of 32. Now what I can do over here is select this box over here and apply the border radius. You can see that it got updated. Right? And let me apply the border radius medium over here. You can see that it got updated. Another thing that we can actually do is apply border radius to different corners. So let's say I want to apply medium to top left and bottom right. And let's say small to top right and bottom left. And the interesting thing to note here is that, let's say if I want to edit this token and I want to change this value from 32 to something like 64, and I update it. I did not select it. Let me just update it. You can see that the tokens have updated. Okay, now let's look at another token, sizing. So I have here 2 sizing tokens. One is small, one is medium. Small one is 32 and a medium is 64. Let me apply small to this box over here and medium to this box. And what we can also do is apply just to the width and the height. And now let me create one more token over here, and let's call it large. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to reference a token which is already there. So let me reference sizing.small. And another thing that you can do with Figma tokens is you can actually use math operations. So let me say that I want sizing large to be referencing sizing small and into times 3. So I can create that. And while I'm doing this, let me also change this from a hard-coded value into something that is referencing sizing small into 2 and update that. And let me apply this to large and this with a width of large. Now you can see over here, we have this But since both medium and small are referencing, medium and large are referencing small, if I change the value of small to something like, let's say 64, and I update it, this should also update. Medium and large also updates. So I think that's pretty neat. Okay, let me just take one more example, which is the spacing tokens. So for spacing tokens, I have a small and a medium. Let me quickly create a large one, which is referencing space dot medium. Sorry, I think I got that wrong. That's right, medium into 2. And one more, which is extra large, which is referencing spacing dot large, again into 2. So now I have this set of tokens, and let me apply this to this auto layout over here. And I say that I want this to have a gap of small, and this one to have a gap of medium, this one to have a gap of large, and this one to have a gap of extra large. So you can see over here how it has updated. And if I just change this small over here to something like 8, and update it, you can see that all the other tokens have also updated. And one more thing that I would like to show here is for the paddings. Right now I just showed the gap or the space between. Now let's say I want to apply a padding top medium. Oh, wait, one second. I don't think you can see it properly. Let me just add a stroke. Yeah, that's better. Then I apply a padding medium on the right, maybe on the bottom and on the left. And I say that I want to have a gap between all these items of extra large. Let me see. Oh, yeah. Okay. So now you can see that the paddings and the gaps have been applied. Okay, so this was a few examples on how to use Figma tokens. And now let me take you back to how we can have a look at the tokens of the headless design system. And for that, let me introduce a third type of design token, which is the component-specific design token. We have just seen about the option tokens and the semantic or the alias tokens. And this is a component-specific design token, where here you can see a button primary background color. So now at this point, we have 3 tiers of tokens: the option tokens over here on the left, the semantic or the alias tokens, which is actions primary background. And then we have the component specific tokens, where here we have the button, which is having the component specific token of button primary background color, and an icon button with icon button primary background color. And this is actually where all the magic happens. So let's have a look. So before going deeper into token structure and theming, let me go back to the button component and let's have a look at the component specific tokens. So here you can see the documentation, which is the development handoff for the tokens. and how it has been done for all the component specific tokens. So this again follows the component API. So you have the common tokens over here. So these are all the common tokens which are applied to a button regardless of the state or the variant. And below that, we have some common tokens like the sizing tokens again. And then we have the tokens for the variants and the states. So let's have a closer look at a CTA button and the states that it has. So here, if you see, we have a CTA button in default, which has a fill of CTA default background color, hover with CTA hover background color. Then we have active, then we have focus, and we have disabled. If you look at it, a button is actually quite a big component. So I would like to show the avatar, which is a little simpler in terms of the variants. So over here, I again have the common tokens, and then for the sizes and for the different type of avatar, which is initial and icon. And in case you're wondering how we did the documentation over here, this is thanks to a new feature that we released in Figma Tokens. Let me just show that quickly. So if I select the avatar over here and I go to inspect and I click here and I click this, I can directly see what are all the tokens that are applied on this avatar. And let's say if I want to go a layer deeper into this text, I can also do that, and exactly shows you what are the different tokens applied on the particular layer. Now that we have seen the component tokens, let's take a look at another visualization to see how theming works. Just give me a second. Sorry, I'm just. Yeah, okay. So this is an example that I wanted to show you guys. Over here on the left, you can see the option tokens or the core tokens as we call it. And here in the middle, we have the semantic tokens. And this is where the theming takes place. In my case, I have divided into two layers again, simplified semantics and granular semantics. I'll explain a bit on that later. And here on the right-hand side, we have the component-specific tokens. And for this example, I have taken the button. So here, if you see, a button has the default background color and the border radius linked to it, which is, if you follow the linkages, links to the granular tokens, actions, CTA default background color, and actions because, as I mentioned earlier, how we have grouped our components. Similarly, our tokens are also grouped, and CTA because it's a CTA button. And the border radius is also linked to the border radius actions, which is then linked to border radius 9 in the core options. And of course, this granular semantics links to a simplified semantics of semantic CTA default, which then links to color blue 100 in the options token. Now, let's bring in a state, for example. If I hover on this button, you can see a change in the linkages. You can see that this button now has a token, which is button CTA hover background color, which has its own linkages between the granular semantics, the simplified semantics, and the option tokens. So if you look here, you can see the linkages changing. Now that we've seen how a state works, I would also like to show you how a theme works in terms of the different linkages and relationships between all these tokens. So let me just show you here. So here there's a brand B semantic. You can see how it is changing. So here you can see that the component specific tokens and the linkages to the granular and the semantic is not changing at all. It's still staying the same. But the only thing that is changing over here is actually the linkage or relationship between the simplified semantic and the core tokens. So over here, this is now linking to teal 500. And for the border radius, it is now linking from, it was earlier border radius 9, now it's at border radius 4. And here again, if you see, if I hover, you can see the same change in the linkages that you could see in brand A. And of course, this is a very oversimplified example. And because a button actually has so many different component specific tokens, as you saw in the documentation and in the development handoff. Let me show you what it actually looks like when you're looking at all the tokens of a button. So let me show you a graph of a full token actually, and what it looks like. So here is something that is visualizing a button, and it's the same thing actually. So you have the core tokens on the left, the semantic tokens in the center, and the button tokens in the right. But as you can see, it's a big spaghetti. And this is just for one component.
Esther, could you zoom in a little bit on some of the token values to show us?
Yeah, sure. Let me zoom in and also show you something very interesting. I was just talking about how we have the button CTA default background color, right? So here it is blue. And actually, let me take this linkage and link it to here, just for an example. And you can actually see the color change over here for the button background color. And so it's actually working in terms of the linkages. So one second, let me link this somewhere. Something to a gray. Oh, it did not take that. This doesn't seem to be wanting to connect. Yeah. So now you can see the color relationship is changing from core color slate 900, which is linking to something I just linked it. So it's semantic warning background, which is then linking, which is then linking to the button CTA default background color. As you can see, this is a huge spaghetti, and I just wanted to give you an idea of what it looks like as a complete picture for one component. And I don't want to go into the details of this actually. And I will show a lot more on theming in a while, but before that, let me finish the file structure that we have. Let's have a look at the different pages that I left off. Here we were at the handoff page for the avatar. where we were looking at the component specific tokens. And let me now open the theming page that we have. So this page is actually, again, structured based on variant properties, similar to how the development handoff page was structured. And while you can say that developers are not really concerned with how the linkages between the tokens work, but for team builders, this is very important because it gives you a clear overview of how each component token links to semantics and eventually to the option token. For easy references, I've also added the component specific tokens over here. And here you can see, so you can see the border, avatar border color, avatar border width, avatar border radius, which is the component specific tokens and how it is linking to the granular tokens, and some of which are linking to the simplified semantic token, and then which links to the core token. In case there is no simplified semantic token, it links directly from the granular token to the core token. And the interesting thing to note over here is that for theming, these two layers of tokens are exactly the things that we need to change to make different themes, basically, to build different themes. Okay, so I think that has been a lot in theory. Let's do something more interesting and build some themes really fast. The first example that I want to show you is how I can build a simple card using the components from our component library. And this example is going to be using a single component library to drive multiple themes. So here I have just turned on a few components that I would be needing to build a card. So a few things like responsive media, a button, typography body, detail, and heading. And I can see it here in the assets now. Okay, let me just take responsive media, a detail, a heading, a paragraph, and a button. Okay, so let me just start off by grouping this and calling this the card body. And now let me group this as well and call this the card. Here, let me make this into an aspect ratio of 16:9, make it fill container. And here, let me remove the space between. And for the card body, let me just give 24 padding. And let me paste this image here. Okay, and a little more adjustments on the component. Make it and before I forget, let me also make this into a fixed width. Let's say 350 is good. And of course, this needs to be fill container. Then we have the body, also as fill container. Can maybe make it medium, make it more legible, change into sans. Then we have the heading. Let me change that also sans. Maybe bold would be good, and large. I think that looks good. And let me also make this into a fill container. And let me just make this look a little more better, reducing the space between. Okay, so now we have a card here, and let me also show my token structure. You can see over here that I have the core. We have many different, I have many different token sets. I have the core over here, then I have the component tokens, then I have a default semantic, then over here you can see in the default semantic, we have a lot of tokens. And the way we build teams is basically creating overrides on the default semantics. So if you see over here, you can see there's so many tokens over here. So we have size, we have space, and then I have a few tokens like CTA primary, which are my simplified tokens. And then I have some granular tokens like actions and inputs and feedback. And how the token plugin really works is by enabling multiple token sets, where on the right, where the set on the right, so if you see over here, you have semantic and AL, the set on the right actually overrides the set on the left. So if you look over here, this is my AL, which is brand A light. And you can see over here that this is compared to my default semantics, is just a handful of tokens, and which is enough to create a very different looking theme. And if you look once more into the brand A dark theme, or the brand A dark token set, it is even less, because this is overriding on AL. And let me demonstrate, it will be a little more clearer. Okay, so let me go back to AL, and let me first apply a few tokens on the detail. Let me apply something which is foreground muted. And for the heading, let me apply an accent, foreground accent. And for the body, let me again apply foreground muted. And for the card itself, let me apply a background surface. And I also want to apply a border radius UI card, which you can't see right now. Also look, you click the content. Yeah, and also let me apply a shadow on this. So, and lastly, for the canvas, let me apply this background canvas. Okay, now this is, I've applied the tokens, but I've not enabled the theme yet. So let me enable the theme over here, brand A light, and oh, 1 second. Yeah, let me update that. So here you can see that this is how brand A light looks like. And let me show you how this brand would look in a dark theme. Let me turn that on. And you can see that there's the difference between the light theme and the dark theme. So this is the light theme. This is the dark theme. Now let me show you another brand that I have created, which is the brand B. So this is how a brand B looks like. As you can see, it looks drastically different from brand A, with the whole typography and the color scheme, and also like the sharp border radiuses. And if I turn on the dark theme of brand B, this is how it would look like. And also let me show brand C, how it looks like, and the dark theme of brand C. So now we can see that we can easily create UI patterns for multiple brands. Let's see how this can actually work on a full page UI. So let me open this. So this is a simple dashboard that I have created using all the components from the component library. And here you can see again the same token sets that I just showed you. And you can see, so let me show you how we can enable the different themes and how it would look like in the different themes. So right now it is enabled on the default semantics. Let me select this, and if I turn on brand A light over here, you can see that it instantly changes in appearance. And if I click on brand A light, now we have the dark theme for brand A. And let me just turn on brand B light. Here we can see how it has changed in terms of appearance. And, oh, sorry, because I need the light theme for the dark themes, because that's how the override works. So yes, so you can see the dark theme for brand B as well. And lastly, let me quickly show the light theme for brand C and how it would look like in the dark theme. So this is how we build themes using our token sets. What I would also like to show you, so right now you have seen a single file component library and how we have used the plugin extensively to create themes. I would also like to quickly show how we have thought about, sorry, let me just go back. How we can, how if any team might want to have less dependency on the plugin, then how this could be used. Let me just quickly show that. So here I have taken here I have taken a few of very small set of components, 4 components, and I have moved them to a single file. Now, if I turn on the plugin, so basically what I've done is I've copy pasted this components from the single file component into this one file. And if I want to have this, if I want to have this library in one theme, let's say, let me just change this setting, apply to document, and I want to have this in brand A. Let me update that. Yes. So here we have the button, the typography, the avatar, and the icon buttons. Okay, this is taking some time, but you can see this updating over here. Yeah. Okay, it still says updating, but it has updated. So now what we can actually do is we can publish this file as a separate library which can, for brand A, for example, and then which can be published and which can be used by consumers of the design system working on the particular brand. And similarly, we can do this for other brands or other teams as well. And yeah, this is how maybe we can work with that. And I know I have not spoken about styles, and currently this whole design system is running without styles, but we're working on a new feature in Figma Tokens to support non-local styles. And once this is released, we will actually be able to reference published Figma styles. And after that, teams will be able to publish a brand-specific set of styles as well. So I have reached the end of my demo, and I hope you enjoyed it. Feel free to connect with me on Twitter, and I'm always there and be happy to help with any questions or discuss anything related to design system or design tokens. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. The chat is alive at the moment, very vibrant. People really enjoyed that. I think it was effectively a masterclass in token organization and distribution. So thank you very much. We don't have much time for questions, so we may follow up after this with questions maybe in a written format. But thank you again for Esther for the presentation, and thank you everybody for attending. We'll see you all next time. Head over to figma.com/events for the next ones. Thanks everybody.